I want to go back to some of the things you covered in your practice video, the Sean Walker stuff, the trade deadline. That's all very interesting. But you talked about Scott Laughton and the possibility of what it would mean to trade him. We've talked about this a few times, but I believe you asked John Tortorella about it exactly today.
I did.
And
it's an important question to ask.
No, it's very important because, one, he's the coach, but he's also one of the main decision makers. Yeah. He also has his finger on the pulse of the room.
Absolutely.
So he's kind of wearing both hats. He's the guy to ask about this. And John Tortorella's response was, quote, trust the process. No, he didn't say that, but he did say process 3 times in the first 4 sentences of like the little block quote thing you put out on Twitter a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So what did you think of his response? Just run us through that conversation a little bit.
Yeah. The quote was, we have so many things to do, so much more of the process to build this team that we can't be getting too emotional when it comes to what is the best thing. If it's the best thing for the future of our team and building it the proper way, we have to follow through. We have to. The guys know it. We've been very forthright publicly about this. We need to stay with it. He more or less kind of brushed aside the idea that they will hesitate on trading, because this wasn't even just conceptual. I specifically asked about Scott Laughton. He's the only guy with a letter. He's beloved in that room. Are you worried if you trade him, this room that you have been pumping up as being so great is going to take a big hit, and suddenly the team isn't going to be playing as cohesively? They're just not going to have that it factor anymore, and then they're going to fall out of the playoff race. And Torts basically just said, in not so many words, I don't care. That if we get a good enough offer for Scott Laughton, it's not going to matter that he is a beloved team leader. We are going to take the offer. It is a fascinating answer from John Tortorella, and it does speak to, at least verbally, we'll see if the actions back up the words, it does speak to how committed they seem to be to doing this the way they envision it needing to be done.
What they're doing in this Scott Laughton instance, like, take a step back, forget what's going on. It's right. It's right that they feel this way about Scott Laughton or any other asset on this team. If your name is not Matvei Michkov, I'm answering the phone about you. Like, I'm interested in what you have to give me for anyone on this team. But it gets me to the approach they took to this season, that they're not going to strip this thing all the way down. They're trying to bring back Nick Sealer. They're trying to bring back freaking Travis Konechny at probably $9 million. And they're like in a playoff run going, yeah, not this year though. Like, they're not going to add.
Right.
Is this kind of like a mixed message? I just, what they're doing right now, it's just trying to thread. We've said they're trying to thread a very fine needle. It seems like they're trying to thread like 3 different needles of varying widths. Like, I don't fully get what they're doing.
I don't think it's a mixed message at all. I think that it's a mixed message to people who have convinced themselves that making the playoffs this year is a big deal. Because I don't think the Flyers, I think the Flyers view making the playoffs this year as a nice little bonus, not something where it's actually super duper important to. It's important in what it allows for them to learn about the players and for the experience that it allows them to have. But it is not like the goal. The goal of this season was not make the playoffs. The goal of this season was to build for the future. And if that includes making the playoffs, great. We're not going to go out of our way to tell the coach to lose games. But if we get a first-round pick offer for Scott Laughton after he's having a down year and he turns 30 in May, yeah, we're probably going to do it.
It's definitely the right thing, but it just like, all right, well then why didn't you trade him when you got the first round? It just leads me to the process of this thing.
Because they felt like last summer they couldn't afford to trade Scott Laughton because they didn't think that the culture was as cemented as they feel like it is now. This is what it boils down to. They think the room can handle the loss of Scott Laughton. They believe that, enough guys, Travis Konechny, Joel Farabee, they believe enough young guys are stepping into leadership roles that they don't necessarily think that Scott Laughton is now as essential as he was last summer when they felt like if they would have traded Laughton, they don't know if they were going to come. Like, think about it last summer. They were just getting rid of Kevin Hayes. They didn't know what the room was going to look like without guys like Hayes and Provorov. Now they know, and they think that this room could handle it. Could they be wrong? Sure. Could the Flyers trade Scott Laughton on March 8th and then for the next 2 weeks they lose 6 straight games? Certainly possible, but I don't think the Flyers would view that as a failure because they never viewed making the playoffs as the end-all be-all of this season.
Yeah, and like playing meaningful games for a majority of the remainder of the season is to me more important than if you actually get in. Now, if you're playing in important games, it's fun to win them. Yeah. But like finding out about what the team is the most important thing. And if they've made this determination that he's not as important to the future as he was the room for the first several months of this season, okay. And again, I think trading him is right. I thought trading him was right in the summer. I don't know if bringing back Travis Konechny is right or wrong. I don't know if bringing back Nick Seeler is right or wrong. I just find these things to maybe be at odds with each other.
But it's not even just the off-ice stuff. The off-ice stuff is important because without the off-ice stuff, I think Laughton would have been traded over the summer. However, it's also on ice. You know, you have the emergence of someone like Ryan Poehling, who more or less plays Scott Laughton's role, except he's younger and faster. And he's been better than Laughton this season on the whole. Yeah. Maybe not over the last couple games, but over the entirety of the season, Poehling's probably been the better player. They have Noah Cates, who, you know, maybe after not taking, and I'm not saying he can't in the next couple of years, but he hasn't taken the offensive step this year. Now maybe you're looking at him as more of a Scott Laughton type, that maybe that's his spot. Now you got 2 guys younger than Scott Laughton who kind of play a Scott Laughton role on the ice. It also just comes down to you might need some spots. And you think, okay, we have some of these young guys who have stepped up in the leadership roles. We think the room can handle it. And we have younger versions of Scott Laughton already on this team. We have another guy in Elliot Desnoyers who might also be a younger version of Scott Laughton who's on the way. I don't know. I think that's probably the way they're looking at it is it's not as essential because they feel like the room is strong enough to handle it. And there are guys on the roster who can do what Laughton is doing.
All right. I accept that answer. Thank you, Charlie. No, I agree with it. And I'm also like, well, then what was the point of, but in the timeline, laying out how things went, like, yeah, moving on from Kevin Hayes was a big deal for the room. You needed some sort of stability. You wanted to change things, but it can't just be 100% fresh.
And they might be wrong. Like, they very well could be wrong. Number one, maybe they should have traded Scott Laughton last summer and they overvalued his impact on the room, and the room would have been perfectly fine without him, and they would still be in the same place they are now. That could be true. It's also possible that maybe Scott Laughton really is the glue of this team, and when you remove him, they'll spend all year next year trying to find a new Scott Laughton to replace what they lost in trading him. We don't know until we see what happens.
Sure.
But I'm just articulating what I interpret to be their thought process as to why they now seem more open to the idea than they were last summer.
We all silly like the mayor.